I am Mathews George. I work for the World Council of Churches as a program executive for Asia and human rights. One of my main responsibilities in WCC today is to work on issues related to human rights. Then I am responsible for organizing annually one international consultation or a seminar, and also provide leadership in organizing a regional training workshop on human rights. That is my main area of responsibility with regard to human rights, in addition to my other work as Asia Secretary of the Council. And also I assist in drafting statements on human rights related with Asia, mainly for Central Committee and the Executive Committee of World Council of Churches, and also drafting statements or letters of concerns on behalf of the General Secretary, normally which we send to respective countries or councils or member churches. You know, I am actually a trained political scientist. I am not coming from the theological backgrounds, but I have been involved in the work of church and ecumenical organizations and bodies back in my country and back in my region in Asia. Although I did my specialization in international relations with a special focus on human rights, that was my PhD thesis, and I decided to opt to work for a church organization or a faith-based organization. Again, I would say that mainly based on my commitments and also my faith to work for the marginalized and the poor. That has been always a concern for me since my student days. I would say that the late Reverend Dr. M.A. Thomas, who was a great Indian ecumenist, and he was I would say that he was a pioneer of practical ecumenism in India. He initiated the founding of this organization, Vigil India Movements, during the time of emergency rule in India. At that time, he was on the opinion that we have it to instill hope in the minds of the people at the grassroots level, where the poor and the marginalized and the illiterate people, those who are not conscious about their own rights. So educating them and making them aware of their own rights, that is the need of the hour. Unless and until we educate them, their human rights cannot be protected. Otherwise, human rights can be only talked at the academic level, or only at the city level, or even at the maximum town level. But if you want to really work for human rights, you have it to focus and target the people, those who live in the grassroots areas, and these are the people every day in their day-to-day life undergoing human rights violations and persecutions. And the most important thing is to make them aware about their own rights. So instill hope in their minds instead of they are living in some kind of a fatalistic approach. You know that in India people have the tendency to believe everything in faith. So he said that we have to break that barrier of fatalistic approach in life and tell them and educate them about their own rights, and then only they can come forward and stand against the human rights violations. Unless and until we reach that goal, it is very difficult to protect the human rights, because the authorities or people, those who are talking about this quite a lot at the academic level, will not be able to protect the rights unless and until the victims, they themselves stand for their own rights. This was his philosophy, and based on this principle that he was trying to educate the people. So We were organizing number of training programs based on Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And then there also he emphasized mostly, and we emphasized mostly, Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. That was the discussion points for all our human rights training programs in those days. I am talking about more than 25 years back. Article 25 mainly, which speaks about the, I would say that the basic amenities in their life, right to food, right to shelter, right to education, and right to medical care. And these are the things that they are deprived, or most people are deprived in their day-to-day life. So there is no point in simply talking to a hungry person who lives most of his lifetime or most of the time in a day with an hungry stomach. Okay, we have to talk about your political rights and your civil rights. If he is hungry, poor, naked and malnourished and diseased and no education and no medical care. So these basic amenities of life that needs to be protected, and that is the most important thing for many people, or a vast majority of people in developing countries, especially in the Asian context in many of the countries. Well, I can tell was one of the bitter or saddest experiences in my human rights related work was that once when I was protesting against a policeman who was beating a young person who was traveling in the same compartment of a train with me, and at that time I protested against this kind of a provocative action of this policeman along with some other passengers. At the end of this journey, this policeman brought some other policemen, and when the train reached at the last station, I was arrested along with two other persons who joined with me in protesting against this, and they kept me in prison for 3 days. And after 3 days, one of my friends, when he came to know about it, and he arranged a bail for me, then I arranged bail for the other two. But the case and the trial lasted for almost 3 years. There were 65 hearings. You know, in India the cases will not be settled so soon. So that was an ordeal waiting. At the end of the case, that the judge found that this was a false case and a false allegations against us, and then we were acquitted, and at the end this policeman was reprimanded by the judge. So that was an ordeal waiting as a young person at that time. This happened in 1987. So it was then it lasted almost till the end of 1989. So almost 3 years it lasted, the 65 hearing. For us, the problem in the church, this is my experience, we are lagging far behind in educating people or talking about human rights related issues, because many of our churches, which these churches come from the conservative background, they think that human rights, these are not their own concerns and issues, and these are all subversive activities or a communist agenda. This is the general assumption or notion of several of the churches. So in that kind of a situation, our task is mainly to inculcate this idea in the minds of the people, especially church leaders and also among the pastors and church workers. With that idea, out of my experience, with that idea, I had initiated an annual human rights training program for church workers, exclusively for church workers, when I was working in the Christian Conference of Asia as the International Affairs and Human Rights Secretary. I initiated this in 1997. Still this program is going on. Every year CCA trains about 25 to 30 church workers. So these church workers, they are becoming instrumental in promoting human rights concerns at the parish level or at the congregation level or at the regional conference level. And which is very important because we have it to articulate the human rights concerns as part of our faith and our commitment and our Christian witness. And we should see this as a mission of the church. And if we are not doing that one, of course we cannot be fully involved in this human rights work effectively. That is my experience and that is my feeling.